The galaxy feared Krithar, not respected, not avoided, feared. It was the most lethal planet ever discovered. The air could burn through lungs in minutes. The seas were made of acid, boiling under black clouds. The ground was alive, covered with plants that could stab, wrap, and eat you whole. The creatures were worse. They hunted with sound, scent, and, sometimes, dreams. No one lived there. No one returned. The official records called it a dead zone. And yet, here, drifting just above that cursed world, was a ship. It was not a new ship. Its hull was old, scarred from battles long past. Metal plating was dented. The paint was faded. But the strangest thing was, it was still powered on. Lights glowed faintly from its windows. The airlock doors were open, almost inviting. A small alien salvage crew circled it in their own vessel. They were not warriors, not explorers, just scavengers. People who lived by finding abandoned ships, pulling out anything valuable, and selling it to whoever paid in credits. There were 5 of them, each from a different world. Talek, the captain, a tall insectoid with 4 arms and eyes like glass marbles. Ren, the pilot, a reptilian with smooth green skin and a habit of clicking his teeth when nervous. Jura, the engineer, a fur-covered mammal with small, quick hands. Ser, the medic, a pale, slow-moving creature with a single large eye. And Lor, the youngest, thin, small, and too curious for his own good. When they found the drifting ship, Talek's first thought was simple. Easy money. "Scan it," he ordered. Ren checked the sensors. No power reading on engines. No movement inside. But he hesitated. Life signs, several. The crew looked at each other. That was impossible. "No one survives here," Jura muttered. "Not in Krithar orbit." Talek's mandibles clicked. "We'll board. If there are survivors, we can rescue them. Or at least take what's left." It took them 10 minutes to line up with the airlock. The black clouds of Krithar swirled far below, lightning flashing across its endless storms. The salvage crew suited up, oxygen tanks hissing softly. Lor's voice was shaking. "Captain, are you sure about this?" "Easy salvage," Talek said. In and out. The airlock opened with a long, low hiss. They stepped inside. The corridor beyond was dark, lit only by faint emergency strips along the floor. The air was breathable, but heavy, smelling faintly of smoke and something metallic. The walls were scratched, as if something with claws had walked here before. Their footsteps echoed. It felt like walking into the belly of a sleeping predator. They moved deeper. Talek kept one hand on his weapon. Ren's tail twitched nervously. Lor glanced at every shadow. They passed through 2 more corridors before reaching a wide chamber. The door slid open, and the crew froze. There were people inside, 5 of them. They were sitting around a metal table, eating. They wore strange, heavy clothing, not like any spacesuit the aliens had seen before. The smell from the food was strong and wrong. The people were tall, broad-shouldered, with flat faces and small eyes compared to most species. Their skin came in different shades, but all of them had the same strange look, a look of complete calm. One of them, a man with short dark hair, looked up from his plate. He smiled. "Well," he said in galactic common. His voice was deep and clear. "Guests." The salvage crew stood frozen. Jura whispered, "What are they?" Lor swallowed hard. He remembered old stories, told in whispers in the deep space docks. Stories about a species no one wanted to meet. They were called humans. The legends said they could survive almost anywhere. Frozen moons, burning deserts, even worlds that killed every other life form. Some stories said they didn't just survive, they thrived. Talek tried to speak, but his voice caught in his throat. The man with the dark hair stood. He wasn't wearing any breathing mask, even though the food on his plate was something that would poison most species instantly. He walked toward them slowly, calmly, like someone who owned the room. "You look lost," he said. No one answered. The man stopped a few steps away. "Welcome aboard." Before Talek could react, the airlock door behind them slid shut with a sharp clank. The crew spun around. It was sealed. No light on the panel. No way out. Lore felt his stomach twist. The humans weren't surprised. In fact, they were still smiling. And then, one of them reached under the table and lifted something. A long black weapon with smooth edges and a faint hum. He held it casually as if it were no more dangerous than a cup of tea. "You'll stay a while," the man said. His smile didn't reach his eyes. The salvage crew didn't move. Outside, lightning flashed across Crithar's deadly surface. Inside, the humans watched their new guests with the calm interest of hunters studying prey. The room was too quiet. The humans didn't move fast, didn't threaten, but the silence felt heavier than any shouted order. Talek forced himself to speak. "We are salvage crew. We thought this ship was empty." The man with the dark hair tilted his head. "Empty? Why would you think that?" Ren stepped forward. "Because you're in Crithar orbit. No one survives here. The air burns. The seas are acid. The predators—" The man interrupted with a small laugh. "Ah, the planet scares you." He glanced at the others around the table. "Hear that? It scares them." The other humans chuckled quietly. It wasn't the laugh of people who were amused. It was the laugh of people who already knew something the aliens didn't. Jorah's nose twitched. "What? Are you eating?" One of the women at the table looked up. She had pale skin, sharp eyes, and hair tied back. She stabbed a piece of steaming meat with her fork and held it up. "Local," she said simply. "Local?" Sayre's voice trembled. "From Crithar?" The woman smiled faintly. "Best protein in the sector?" Lore's eyes widened. He knew exactly what she meant. The food was from one of the predators down there, the flesh of a creature that could melt steel with its blood. Eating it raw was death to most species. Even cooked, the toxins would kill in minutes. But the humans kept eating, bite after bite, talking casually as if it was nothing. Talek took a slow step backward. "We'll go. We didn't mean to intrude." The man shook his head. "Too late for that." He gestured to the table. "Sit." No one moved. His voice hardened, still calm but unshakable. "Sit." Reluctantly, Talek and the others sat down. The humans didn't offer masks, didn't filter the air. The smell of the food was sharp and burning in their nostrils. The man leaned back in his chair. "My name is Captain Hayes. This is my crew. We're from Earth." Ren frowned. "Never heard of it." "Most haven't," Hayes said. "It's far away, very far, but humans, we like to travel." Sayre looked around. "Why, here, this is the most dangerous place in the galaxy." Hayes took another slow bite of the Crithar meat. "That's why we're here." The words hung in the air like a weight. Before Talek could ask what he meant, a deep, distant noise echoed through. The ship. It wasn't metal creaking. It wasn't engines. It was something alive. Lore froze. He had heard that sound before, in recorded warnings. It was the call of a Vorath, a predator from Crithar's skies, large enough to tear small ships apart. The sound came again, closer this time. The walls seemed to vibrate with it. Jorah's fur bristled. "Something is outside! The aliens!" Looked toward the sealed airlock, fear rising. But the humans didn't even stand up. Hayes glanced toward the sound, then at his crew. "Finish your meal," he said. Lore's voice shook. "Do you not hear that?" Hayes finally stood slowly as if he had all the time in the world. "Oh, we hear it." He walked to a storage locker, pulled it open, and took out a long rifle with a strange design. The barrel glowed faintly blue. "What is that thing?" Wren hissed. Hayes smiled faintly. "Dinner." The rifle in Hayes's hands seemed to hum softly, as if it were alive. He checked the settings with practiced ease, then leaned it against his shoulder. The aliens sat frozen. They were trained to salvage abandoned ships, not to watch someone. Prepare to fight a monster from the most dangerous planet in the galaxy. Hayes noticed their fear and smirked. "Relax, it's only one Vorath." "Only?" Jorah's voice cracked. "A Vorath destroys fleets. One of them took down 3 warships above Irath Prime last cycle." Hayes gave a small shrug. Maybe they just didn't know where to shoot, the E. Other humans stood now, gathering their own weapons. Some were blades, others were guns with designs the aliens didn't recognize. None of them wore heavy armor, just light gear that allowed them to move fast. Lore finally found his voice. "Why are you even here? Why come to a place like Krythar?" Hayes glanced at him. "Exploring." The answer was too simple. Lore frowned. "Exploring what? There's nothing here but death." The captain's smile widened, but he didn't explain. "Death can be useful." Before anyone could ask more, the Vorath's call echoed again, louder this time, and so close that the deck plates vibrated under their feet. The aliens looked toward the outer hull in panic. A deep metallic clang shook the ship. Jorah's fur stood on end. "It's landed on us!" The humans didn't rush. They moved with slow precision, sealing inner doors and taking positions. The woman with the pale skin pulled down her visor and loaded her weapon. Wren's claws scraped the floor. "We have to leave before it tears through." Hayes chuckled. "Leave? We've been waiting for it." A sudden screech of metal tore through the air. The Vorath's massive claw punched through the outer wall of the ship, curling like a hook. The pressure alarms blared, warning of a breach. The aliens stumbled back, shouting in fear. But Hayes simply raised his rifle, sighted along the glowing barrel, and whispered, "Hold steady." Another claw punched through. Then a sharp, snapping sound. The Vorath was testing the hull. The entire ship shook under its weight. Talec's heart pounded. "Do something!" he shouted. Hayes's voice was calm. "In a moment!" Through the torn metal, Lore caught his first glimpse of it. Black scales, eyes like burning gold, teeth longer than his arms. The creature let out a roar so loud it rattled the crew's bones. Hayes finally squeezed the trigger. The rifle fired with no explosion, no loud bang, only a thin, sharp beam of blue light that cut through the air and vanished into the Vorath's eye. The sound stopped. The claws twitched once, then went still. Hayes lowered the rifle as the massive body slid off the ship and fell toward Krythar's surface far below. He turned to the aliens, expression unreadable. "That's why we're here," he said quietly. "Krythar keeps things interesting." The aliens stared at him, too stunned to speak. Somewhere deep inside Lore, a dangerous thought took root. Maybe the old stories about humans weren't myths after all. The silence after the Vorath's fall was strange. It wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of silence that comes before something worse. Hayes slung the rifle over his shoulder and calmly began resealing the damaged section of the hull. His crew worked with the same calm focus, moving like they'd done this 100 times before. The aliens, on the other hand, were shaking. Jorah kept glancing at the torn metal as if expecting another claw to appear. Wren's tail whipped back and forth in agitation. Sir's large, single eye kept darting toward the planet below. "You act like this is normal," Talec finally said, his voice sharp. Hayes didn't look up. "Because it is." "That thing could have killed us all," Jorah shouted. Hayes gave a small smile. "It didn't," Lore leaned closer to the captain. Are there more of them? Oh, yes, Hayes said, tightening a panel with a small tool. The Vorath was just one of the locals. Krithar is busy this season, Wren hissed. Busy? This is a death world. Hayes's pale-skinned crew member, the woman with the sharp eyes, spoke for the first time since the fight. It's not a death world to us. The aliens exchanged uneasy glances. Before anyone could respond, the ship's sensors gave a low, continuous tone. Not the sharp alarm of a predator attack, but the deep pulse of a ship proximity warning. Jura hurried to a console and scanned. His fur stood on end. Multiple contacts, moving fast, surrounding us. Hayes walked over and looked at the readings without alarm. Not animals this time. Then what? Talek demanded. Hayes's lips curved into a thin smile. Hunters! Through the viewport, faint shapes appeared in the swirling clouds above. Krithar, small attack craft, gliding low and silent. Their hulls were painted in patterns that blended with the storm. They've been following us, the sharp-eyed woman said. They want what we're here for. And what are you here for? Sarah pressed. Hayes didn't answer. Instead, he turned to his crew. Positions. The humans moved without hesitation, grabbing weapons and sealing off sections of the ship. The aliens realized, with a chill, that the humans weren't trying to escape. You're going to fight them? Wren asked in disbelief. Hayes's smile widened. Of course. You don't run from a hunt. You finish it. Outside the attack. Craft split into two groups, one circling high, the other diving low toward the ship. Lightning flashed, illuminating their jagged silhouettes. Jura's voice dropped to a whisper. You people are insane. Hayes glanced at him. No, we're human. The storm outside swallowed the hunters' ships, their outlines vanishing, and reappearing with each flash of lightning. The salvage crew could hear the faint thump of weapons being armed, the crackle of radio chatter in a language they didn't know. Hayes moved like a man who had already planned the fight. His crew followed him without a single question, each taking a position along the corridors and hatches. They didn't hide behind armor, didn't cower in cover. They looked eager. The aliens stayed near the center of the ship, unsure whether to run or stay still. Jura spoke first, his voice low. They're smiling. Why are they smiling? They're enjoying this, Sarah replied, her tone flat. They want the fight. Lore thought about the legends. In every story, humans didn't just survive danger, they walked into it. They looked for it. And they won. But the stories also said that wherever humans went, the danger got worse. He looked at Hayes, who was strapping a knife to his thigh alongside his rifle. There were old scars along his arm, long, pale lines and deep marks burned into the skin. They weren't from one type of wound. They were from many, too many. Hayes caught Lore staring. You're wondering about these? He tapped the scars with a finger. Lore hesitated, then nodded. Krithar, Hayes said simply. The burns, the cuts, the teeth marks, all from this planet. And I'm still here. Jura flinched. Why? Why would you come back? Hayes smiled in a way that wasn't entirely friendly. Because no one else can. Before the aliens could ask more, the hull shuddered. One of the hunters' ships had latched onto the outer docking ring. The sound of magnetic clamps echoed through the corridors. Hayes's crew readied their weapons. No one looked nervous. The pale-skinned woman glanced at Hayes. You want them alive? Some of them, he replied. The rest, his voice, trailed off into silence. The aliens exchanged glances. Jura's fur was standing on end. Sir's single eye narrowed in fear. Wren's claws tapped nervously against the floor. Lore whispered what they were all thinking. They don't just fight to survive. They fight because they like it. The ship rocked again as the airlock seals began to hiss. The hunters were coming through. Hayes's voice was calm, steady. "Let them in." The hiss of the airlock grew louder, followed by the heavy thump of metal doors releasing. A final burst of steam rolled across the corridor floor. And then the intruders came. They weren't human. Their bodies were covered in dark, scaled armor, their faces hidden behind breathing masks. They moved quickly, holding weapons shaped like long, jagged claws of metal. Their eyes glowed faint red through their visors. The salvage crew froze where they stood. The humans moved forward. Hayes didn't shout orders. He didn't need to. His crew spread out like a pack of predators surrounding prey. The pale-skinned woman knelt and took aim with a short, compact rifle. Another human pulled out 2 blades, spinning them in his hands with practiced ease. The first hunter stepped fully inside. Hayes shot him once, not in the chest, but in the leg. The hunter fell, his weapon clattering to the floor. "Alive," Hayes said quietly. "For now." The rest of the hunters rushed in. The corridor exploded with noise, gunfire, the clash of metal, and the deep roar of something almost like laughter from the humans. They fought with speed that made the alien's eyes struggle to follow. Jura ducked as a blade-wielding human leapt over him, landing on top of a hunter and driving both knives into the seams of its armor. Ren backed into a wall, shielding Sir, as the pale-skinned woman dropped 2 more targets with perfect shots. Hayes didn't stay in one place. He moved through the chaos like he had all the time in the world, firing, striking, and shoving attackers aside. His expression was calm, almost bored. "Captain!" Lore shouted. "There's more at the aft hatch." Hayes tossed him something heavy. A rifle. "You're coming with us," Hayes said. "What?" Lore's voice cracked. "You want to leave alive? Then move." Before Lore could argue, Hayes pushed him toward the rear corridors. The sound of boots and claws on metal echoed behind them. The smell of ozone from the weapons stung Lore's nose. They reached the aft hatch, just as more hunters began cutting through. Hayes took position to the left of the door, motioning Lore to the right. "When it opens," Hayes said, "don't hesitate. Aim for the joints in the armor." "Don't think," Hayes interrupted. "Just shoot." The metal circle of the hatch fell inward with a crash. A hunter stepped through, and Hayes was already moving, slamming, his shoulder into the creature and firing point blank. Lore's hands shook, but when the second hunter came through, he pulled the trigger. The shot hit. The hunter stumbled, and Hayes finished it. More came. Lore didn't remember thinking after that, only aiming, firing, reloading. The sound of battle filled his ears. Minutes later, the corridor was silent again. The bodies of the hunters lay scattered. The humans walked among them, checking for survivors. Hayes clapped Lore on the shoulder. "Not bad for your first hunt." Lore's stomach churned at the word hunt. He looked at the dead and wounded, then at the humans, and he couldn't tell which side was supposed to be scarier. The storm clouds of Krythar churned below, a swirling sea of black and green. Lightning forked across the horizon, striking the jagged peaks of mountains that pierced the toxic atmosphere. From the salvage ship's viewport, the surface looked like a nightmare. Boiling acid rivers, forests of spiked plants that moved, as if alive, and shadows that shifted even when there was no wind. Hayes stood at the controls of a small dropship, strapping on a light vest. "We're going down," he said. Talik's voice shook. "Down? To the surface? Are you insane?" Hayes didn't answer. Instead, he began loading crates of weapons and gear into the hold. His crew worked silently beside him, each moving with the efficiency of people who had done this before. Lore watched in disbelief. The humans were preparing as if they were going camping, not as if they were heading into the most dangerous world in the galaxy. Ren hissed. "You've already killed a Vorith up here. What could possibly be worth going down there?" "Business," Hayes said simply. "And business is better where no one else dares to go." The pale-skinned woman tossed Lore a small mask. You're coming too. What? No, You handled yourself at the hatch, Hayes interrupted. You'll do fine. Lore looked to Talek for help, but the captain's mandibles clicked in a way that meant, don't argue. The humans weren't asking. They were deciding. Minutes later, the dropship detached from the main vessel. The descent began. The deeper they went, the darker it became. The clouds swallowed the light, and the only glow came from the dropships, forward beams, cutting a narrow path through the storm. The wind slammed against the hull, making the craft shake violently. Hayes sat in the pilot's chair, completely relaxed. Lore gripped the seat so hard his claws ached. The surface rose into view. It wasn't solid ground. It was a shifting, writhing landscape. The trees were columns of black chitin, bending and straightening like living towers. Something moved among them. Massive shapes that disappeared when the light touched them. The dropship touched down on a narrow stretch of black stone beside an acid river. The heat hit instantly, like opening a furnace door. Even through the mask, Lore could smell the sharp tang of burning metal. Hayes stepped out first. The ground hissed faintly under his boots. His crew followed, scanning the shadows without fear. Lore hesitated at the hatch, staring at the alien world. Every instinct screamed at him to stay inside. Hayes looked back. If you're going to die here, you might as well see why. The moment Lore stepped out, the ground under his feet shifted, as if something was moving beneath the stone. Jura's voice crackled over the radio. "Movement on the ridge!" Hayes didn't even look up. "Let it come closer!" A shape appeared against the black horizon, tall, thin, but moving unnaturally fast. Then another, and another. Lore's throat went dry. "What are they?" Hayes's answer was quiet, almost amused. "Bait." The thin shapes on the ridge moved like shadows torn from the ground. Their limbs were long, jointed in strange places, bending too far to be natural. Their heads tilted at impossible angles, and their movements were almost silent despite the rocky terrain. Lore had seen a lot in his life, but nothing like this. "They're coming straight for us," he whispered. "That's the idea," Hayes replied, kneeling beside a strange metal case. He opened it, revealing a cluster of small black devices with blinking green lights. Lore frowned. "What are those?" "Appetizers," Hayes said. The pale-skinned woman moved ahead, planting the devices in a half-circle around the landing site. The rest of the humans began positioning themselves behind rocks and twisted pillars of chitin. Talek's voice came over the comm. "Hayes, I count at least 8 of them. What's the plan?" "Same as always," Hayes said calmly. "Draw them in, make them commit, and then end it." The shadow creatures reached the riverbank. Even from a distance, Lore could see their skin ripple as if something was moving beneath it. Their mouths opened, showing rows of needle-like teeth that glistened in the dim light. One of them made a sound. Not a growl, not a roar, but a perfect imitation of Jura's voice. "Help me," it called, in the exact tone Jura would use. Lore's fur prickled. "It's copying us." Hayes didn't look concerned. "That's what they do. They call you closer. Works on most prey." The humans didn't move. They waited. The creatures stepped into the half-circle. Hayes tapped a small trigger in his hand. The devices lit up bright blue and released a deep, vibrating hum. The ground shuddered, and the acid river surged upward, pulled by an invisible force, splashing in long, violent arcs toward the creatures. The liquid hit them like molten fire. Their skin bubbled instantly, their limbs twisting as they shrieked in a chorus of stolen voices. But they didn't run. They charged. "Time for the main course," Hayes said. The humans opened fire, not in wild panic, but in sharp, controlled bursts. Every shot hit a joint or a vital point. Blades flashed in the gaps between gunfire, cutting deep. One creature leapt for Lore, and Hayes stepped in front of it, driving a knife under its jaw and into its skull in one smooth motion. Within minutes, it was over. The bodies lay smoking, half dissolved by the acid. The smell was thick and bitter, clinging to Lore's mask. Hayes knelt by one of the corpses and drew a thick syringe from his belt. He stabbed it into the creature's neck, pulling out a vial of dark, swirling fluid. "What's that?" Lore asked. "Why we're here," Hayes said. "One step closer to the cure." Before Lore could ask what he meant, Jura's voice came through the comm again. Tense this time. "Captain, you'd better get back to the ship. Something big is coming." Hayes looked toward the horizon. A deep rumble rolled through the ground, and in the distance, something massive moved between the spiked towers. He smiled faintly. "Perfect. We needed a bigger sample anyway." The ground trembled with each step of the approaching beast. It wasn't fast. It didn't need to be. Everything in its path moved aside or died. Through the thick mist of Crithar's heat, its shape slowly emerged. At first, Lore thought, it was just another ridge. Then the ridge moved and he realized it had legs, 6 of them, each as thick as a transport pod. Its body was covered in armor-like plates, black with streaks of dull red. The head was long, flat, and low, with 2 forward tusks like curved blades. Beneath them, rows of teeth dripped with some kind of glowing fluid. Jura's voice cracked over the comm. That's a dreadmaw." Even Talek sounded rattled. "Those things are walking extinction events. They swallow entire packs of Vorath like nothing." Hayes didn't flinch. He just set down his rifle and began unstrapping a much larger weapon from his back, a cannon with rotating barrels and a faint electric whine. The pale-skinned woman looked to him. "We taking it alive?" "Alive?" Hayes smirked. "Only long enough to bleed it." The dreadmaw turned its massive head toward them. Its eyes were small compared to its body, but bright, glowing with the same molten color as the rivers. It let out a low, vibrating roar that made Lore's bones ache. Then it charged. The humans didn't scatter. They split, moving in opposite directions, forcing the creature to choose a target. It followed Hayes. Hayes didn't run. He jogged just fast enough to stay ahead of it, leading it toward a cluster of jagged black pillars. His crew fired from the sides, drawing its attention just enough to make it stumble. Lore was frozen at the dropship's hatch, watching in disbelief. Hayes darted between the pillars, the dreadmaw smashing through them like paper. "Now!" Hayes shouted. The pale-skinned woman hit a detonator. The pillars collapsed, revealing a tangle of heavy cables they'd hidden earlier. The dreadmaws. Front legs tangled, slowing its charge for just a moment, long enough for Hayes to plant his cannon against its side and fire. The weapon roared, spitting glowing rounds that tore through even the beast's armored hide. The dreadmaw bellowed and swung its head, tusks slicing through the air. Hayes dove aside just in time. It thrashed wildly, smashing into the acid river. Steam exploded upward, covering everything in a blinding cloud. When the mist cleared, the dreadmaw was lying on its side, still breathing but unable to move. Hayes walked up, drawing another large syringe. He stabbed it into the thick vein under its jaw, pulling the same dark, swirling fluid as before. "That's 2, Hayes said. 3 more and we're done here." Lore stared at him in horror. "You're not leaving until you fight 5 of these things?" Hayes glanced at him with a faint grin. "It's called a challenge." Before Lore could answer, a distant roar echoed through the valley. Deeper, louder, and far away. Hayes's grin widened. "Sounds like number 3 just heard us." The dropship's engines whined as they lifted off from the riverbank, the dreadmaw's body shrinking below them until it was just another dark shape among Crithar's twisted landscape. Steam still rose where its blood had touched the acid. River. Inside, the humans moved like nothing unusual had happened. Hayes placed the vials of black fluid into a small metal case lined with blue lights. The case sealed itself with a faint hiss. Lore couldn't hold it in any longer. What is that stuff? You risk your lives for it. You fight monsters for it. Why? Hayes didn't answer right away. He watched the storm clouds pass beneath them as the dropship climbed. Finally, he said, because it's worth more than any ship, any cargo, any treasure you've ever seen. That's not an answer, Wren said sharply. Hayes's pale-skinned, second-in-command, spoke instead. The blood of Crithar's apex predators carries something rare, an immunity. Not just to this planet's poisons, but to diseases that kill entire worlds. Sayre's single eye widened. You're saying it's a cure? Hayes nodded. For a plague, one spreading faster than anyone wants to admit. Most governments are still pretending it's not real. Talek leaned forward. And you plan to sell it? Hayes's expression darkened. No. We plan to keep it out of the wrong hands. If the wrong people get this, they'll decide who lives and who dies. That's not happening. The cabin went quiet. Lore stared at him. So you're risking all this? For the galaxy? Hayes smirked. Let's just say the galaxy owes us a few favors. Before anyone could speak again, the dropship's sensors lit up with red warnings. Jura's voice came from the main ship, tense and fast. Captain, we've got company. Not from the planet. Ships inbound. Multiple signatures. Hayes stepped to the cockpit and looked at the readings. The vessels were sleek, fast, and armed. Not scavengers. Not traitors. They followed us, the pale-skinned woman said. Lore's stomach sank. Who? Hayes's voice was quiet, almost amused. People who'd kill everyone on Crythar just to take this case. He tapped the metal box with the vials. Moment later, the comm crackled with an unfamiliar voice. Human vessel, power down and prepare to be boarded. Refusal will be met with force. Hayes leaned back in the pilot's chair, a slow grin spreading across his face. Looks like they brought the fight to us. The enemy ships broke through Crithar's storm cover like dark knives slicing the clouds. There were 6 of them, fast attack craft, built for speed and killing power. Their black hulls shimmered with energy shields, and each one carried heavy weapons on rotating mounts. From the salvage ship above, Jura's voice came through the comm. Captain, they're spreading out. 2 on high approach, 4 moving to cut you off from the North Valley. Hayes studied the formation without a hint of fear. They're not here to talk. They're here to take the cargo. Talek's mandibles clicked nervously. Then we get off this planet now. No, Hayes said flatly. Up there they have the advantage. Down here we do. Lore blinked. You're saying you want to fight them on Crythar? Hayes smiled faintly. Exactly. Let's see. How they handle a planet that wants to kill them as much as we do. The dropship banked hard, diving back toward the surface. Lightning flashed around them, and the air grew thick with heat and static. Behind them, the enemy ships adjusted course, still closing in. The pale-skinned woman loaded a fresh power cell into her rifle. We'll need to lead them into the acid flats. Hayes nodded. And the Spire field. Nothing scrambles sensors faster. The enemy ships opened fire. Bright streaks of plasma tore past the dropship, exploding against the rocks and sending shards of molten stone flying in all directions. Hayes twisted the controls, skimming so low over the ground that the hull scraped against jagged ridges. Lore clung to the nearest seat harness, teeth clenched. You call this advantage? Hayes didn't answer. His focus was on the hunt. The humans weren't fleeing. They were drawing the enemy in. The dropship shot through a narrow canyon, the enemy ships following close behind. Above them, shapes moved, massive flying predators drawn to the sound of engines. Their huge wings cast shadows over the canyon walls. Hayes's grin widened. "There's our backup." One of the enemy ships veered too high and was instantly seized mid-air by a predator's talons, torn apart before it could even fire. The rest hesitated. That was their mistake. "Time to land," Hayes said. "We'll finish the rest face to face." The dropship touched down on a flat of cracked black stone, surrounded by steaming rivers and jagged spires. The enemy ships circled above like vultures. Hayes stood, grabbing his rifle. "Positions! Let them come to us." The air was thick with heat and the hiss of acid rivers. Steam curled up from cracks in the black stone, carrying the smell of metal and rot. Above, the enemy ships circled like hungry carrion birds, their weapons glowing. Hayes and his crew moved quickly, taking cover behind jagged spires and twisted rock formations. The pale-skinned woman planted strange metallic spheres along the edges of the flat ground. Their small lights blinked red, then steady green. Lore crouched behind a boulder, watching. "What are those? Mines?" "Better," Hayes said. "They're invitations." The first enemy ship swooped low, firing plasma bolts that sent chunks of stone flying. Hayes waited until it passed overhead, then fired a single shot into its underbelly. The round punched through the shield, sparking against the engine core. The craft swerved, clipped a spire, and spun out of control into the acid river. Steam exploded upward as the ship dissolved, the screams of its crew vanishing under the hissing boil. The other enemy ships adjusted, wary now. But the humans didn't. Look worried. If anything, they looked like predators waiting for prey to step closer. From the distance, small black shapes began crawling over the rocks, creatures drawn by the noise and the scent of burning metal. They were low to the ground, with too many legs and jaws that clicked in hunger. Talik's voice was calm over comms. "The ground's moving. We've got swarms incoming." Hayes smirked. "Perfect. Let's see if our guests can multitask." The enemy ships came lower, dropping squads of armored soldiers. Their weapons were sleek and heavy, built for clean, controlled kills, the kind that worked fine in cities, but not here. The moment their boots touched Krithar's ground, the planet attacked them. The swarm of black creatures rushed in from every angle, biting through armor with a sound like snapping bones. Soldiers screamed, firing wildly, their formation breaking instantly. That's when the humans moved. Hayes's crew hit from 3 sides at once, using the chaos as cover. Every shot was precise, every movement calculated. The pale-skinned woman rolled one of her blinking spheres toward the densest cluster of enemy troops. It exploded in a flash of blue light and a shockwave that knocked them straight into an acid pool. Lore watched in disbelief. The humans weren't just fighting the enemy, they were commanding the battlefield. The planet's monsters, its deadly terrain, even the boiling rivers, all of it became weapons in their hands. Within minutes, 2 of the enemy ships were gone, one ripped apart by flying predators, the other sinking into the acid. The ground squads were scattered or dead. But just as it seemed over, the largest enemy ship descended through the clouds. It was bigger than Hayes's entire salvage vessel, with enough firepower to level the valley. Hayes didn't flinch. He just looked up at it and said, "Finally, someone worth our time." The sky darkened as the enemy warship lowered through the storm. Its engines roared like thunder, shaking the spires around the battlefield. The massive ship's shadow swallowed the humans and the alien crew, stretching across the boiling rivers and cracked ground. It didn't waste time. The warship opened fire, sending a barrage of plasma bolts toward the humans' position. Each impact tore open the stone, spraying shards and acid steam into the air. The ground shook so violently that Lore stumbled and fell. Hayes grabbed him by the arm and pulled him behind cover. "Stay low. If it sees you, you're ash." The pale-skinned woman was already moving, setting more of the blinking spheres along. the ground in a pattern Lore didn't understand. She spoke into her comm. "Charges set. Just need them to come closer." The warship released its drop bay doors. Heavy armored soldiers leapt down, landing hard on the black stone. These weren't like the others. Their armor was thicker, their weapons larger, and their movements precise. "They sent elites," Talek said, his voice grim. Hayes grinned. "Good. I hate easy fights." The enemy troops advanced in a tight formation, shields overlapping. But Krethar wasn't a planet you could march across safely. A geyser of boiling acid erupted between them, breaking their line for just a second. And in that second, the humans attacked. From the left, Hayes and Wren poured fire into their exposed sides. From the right, the pale-skinned woman triggered 2 of the spheres, sending shockwaves through the ground. The blast knocked soldiers into the swarm pits, where the creatures waited hungrily. Overhead, the warship tried to adjust, lowering even further to give its troops cover. That was exactly what Hayes wanted. "Now!" he shouted. The pale-skinned woman hit the detonator. The ground beneath the warship exploded in a chain of blasts, revealing deep fissures filled with acid. The massive ship tilted, one of its landing struts sinking into the molten liquid. The metal hissed and melted, the warship groaning like a wounded animal. But it wasn't finished. Its forward cannons rotated toward the humans, glowing brighter and brighter. Lore felt the heat from here. A single shot would vaporize all of them. Hayes looked at Talek. "You still have that thing?" Talek's mandibles clicked in something like a smile. "Always." From his pack, Talek pulled a long, spear-like launcher. He aimed straight at the warship's glowing cannon and fired. The projectile shot forward, piercing the weapon's core. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the cannon exploded outward in a blinding flash, tearing through the ship's front section. The warship reeled, its engines screaming. It tried to lift off, but the damage was too great. With a deafening roar, it sank backward into the acid fissure, vanishing beneath a mountain of steam. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of boiling rivers and the distant cries of Krethars. Predators. Hayes slung his rifle over his shoulder. "That's it. We're done here." Lore stared at him. "You call that done?" "That was impossible." Hayes smiled faintly. "Impossible is just another word for fun." The battlefield still steamed as the humans gathered their gear. The air smelled of scorched metal and acid. The sky above had begun to clear, but the strange, red-tinted clouds gave the impression that Krethar wasn't happy to see them leave. Hayes's crew moved with speed and precision, packing up the vials of dreadnought blood and whatever salvage they could carry. No one spoke much. The silence felt heavier now, like the planet itself was listening. Lore watched as Hayes stopped for a moment, looking across the black horizon. "You'll miss this place?" he asked, half joking. Hayes shook his head. "You don't miss a place like Krethar. You survive it, and you remember what it taught you." The dropship arrived from the main vessel, engines whining as it hovered low over the cracked stone. The humans and aliens boarded quickly. Lore noticed Wren scanning the skies as if expecting another enemy attack, but the clouds were empty, and says. The dropship lifted, the ground below shifted, giant shapes moving just beneath the surface, restless now that their prey was gone. Lore shivered. This world was alive in ways he didn't understand. When they docked with the salvage ship, Jura met them at the hatch. "Repairs are done. Engines ready. Shields at 60%. "Good enough," Hayes said. "Get us off this rock." The yacht salvage ship rose into Krethar's upper atmosphere, breaking through the storm layer into open space. The sudden quiet was strange. No more roaring winds, no more shrieking predators. Just the hum of the engines. But peace never lasted long with humans. The pale-skinned woman stood at the sensor station. "Captain, we've got a shadow." Hayes walked over. The readings showed a single ship trailing them, small, fast, keeping its distance. Another enemy? Wren asked. Hayes studied the signature and frowned. No, this isn't one of theirs. This one's different. The shadow ship didn't send a hail, didn't speed up, didn't slow down. It just followed, silent and patient. Lore's fur bristled. Why would someone follow us after what happened down there? Hayes's eyes narrowed. Because whatever's coming next, Krythar was just the warm-up. The shadow ship kept its distance for hours. No lights, no weapons fire, no signal. Just the steady presence in the dark, always exactly the same distance behind them. Inside the salvage ship, the tension grew. Wren paced the bridge, his hand never far from his sidearm. Talek sat in silence, his eyes fixed on the rear display. Even Jura, usually calm, tapped the console nervously. Finally, the pale-skinned woman looked up from the sensors. It's sending something. A single burst transmission. Hayes gave a nod. Put it on. A crackle of static filled the bridge, then a voice came through. Low, distorted, and cold. Captain Hayes, you have something that belongs to us. You will deliver it. If you refuse, we will take it, and everything else you care about. The voice cut out, replaced by silence. Lore glanced at Hayes. Is it the same people we fought? On Krythar? Hayes shook his head slowly. No, these ones didn't waste ships and soldiers trying to kill us. They're patient, smarter, more dangerous. The pale-skinned woman checked her console again. Captain, they're not alone anymore. On the display, more ships appeared. First 2, then 5, then 10. A whole fleet, all emerging from the black of space, spreading out like a trap closing. Jura's voice was tight. We can't outrun that. Hayes didn't look scared. If anything, he almost smiled. Then we don't run. He turned to his crew. Gear up. Krythar was the fight they saw. Now, they'll see what we've been saving. Lore frowned. Saving? Saving what? Hayes stepped toward the cargo bay and tapped the case holding the vials of dreadnought blood. A cure that can save worlds or destroy them, and right now, it's our only bargaining chip. The shadow fleet began to close in. Red targeting markers lit up across the bridge displays. The salvage ship's engines hummed louder, ready for whatever came next. Hayes looked out into the void and whispered, Round 2. The screen faded to black.